Hello and welcome to another pattern recognition video for beginners. I have the ratings set from 100 to 700, and if you're more advanced than that, then this will be a good refresher where you can cover some of the basics to help you remember those simple patterns more easily and hopefully be able to use them in your own games. Now, if you're not familiar with pattern recognition, you just solve a set of puzzles, and I recommend you do it more than once. If you just solve them once, then you'll forget the patterns that you learn. I'll try and do at least 10 puzzles, and if these are too easy for you, I'm going to try and do a series of beginner puzzles one day, then tomorrow intermediate, then advanced, and we'll see how that works out. But I get the most response for these puzzle videos, so I'm going to try and do more of these. So 3 days in a row of puzzles, and then on the fourth day I'll mix in some other type of video. If there's something you'd like to see, feel free to leave comments. All right, let's begin here. We have the white pieces. One thing you want to do is check the material count and see if you're ahead or behind. So white is definitely behind here by a rook, a bishop, and 2 pawns. So we need to act immediately. Now, hopefully you already found the answer. If not, then pause the video and take a look. But checks first is definitely the first thing you want to look at. And I always highlight that because it's so important. You want to look at checks, captures, and threats in that order. Checks first is the most forcing. We could go here, of course, but then we would just be captured. So the best move, hopefully you found it, is to bring the queen up here, delivering a check to the king, forcing the king into the corner, and then we'll deliver a mate. So this is a basic pattern, beginner pattern, but it's good to go over this to refresh your memory. And good combination, nice little pattern here of working together with a rook and a queen, delivering mate. That was rated 570. All right, I'm going to try and speed this up a little bit because I have to go to a local chess club after I do this video. I'm going to try and get in maybe this video and then the intermediate puzzle for tomorrow as well. All right, let's move on here. You're wanting to do puzzles and probably hear less of my talking. So let's see. White's turn to move here. If we count up the material, we have 6 pawns. Our opponent has 7, so we're down by a pawn. We're also down... no, we have a queen. So there's an imbalance. We have a queen, but our opponent has a rook, an extra knight, and an extra bishop. So overall, we are behind in material. So we need to do something here to try and go for the win. All right, hopefully you found the answer, as this is a basic, beginner patterns. All right, you want to look at checks first, and the only check I see, would be the queen along this line here, or maybe a better one, the knight could go here but would be captured, or the knight could land here. So hopefully you found that answer. Now remember, it takes about 3 pieces to deliver a check, sometimes more or less, of course, but that's about the average. Here, 2 were able to do it, and it depends on what defenses your opponent has as well. So a nice little mate in 1 with queen and knight working together. All right, on to puzzle number 3. So I want to try and do 10 since these are easier puzzles. On the more difficult videos, I tend to only do 5 puzzles lately to keep the video from going too long. As I mentioned, too much talking probably doesn't help as well, but let me know what you think in the comments. All right, what do we have here? We're behind by a pawn. All right, if we're looking for, okay, so you want to look at checks, captures, and threats. Now, sometimes the check doesn't always lead to a mate, but there might be a tactic involved, and checks first as their most forcing. And hopefully you found the answer, because the only check would be to move our rook here, delivering an attack on the king. Now, that's not a mate because the king can escape by moving forward, of course, here or here. But it unleashes this discovered attack, and we'll pick up a rook, and then we should be able to win the endgame with that extra material. So check, and then we grab the rook. All right, hopefully you found that one. And on to puzzle number 4. Oh, a knight has just captured a pawn here right in the center. Now, let's do a quick material count. It looks like we have all the original pieces on both sides, but after that capture, we're down 1 pawn. So our opponent has 1 extra pawn now. But was that a mistake? Now remember, this is beginner patterns here, and often beginners will not be careful when they're making a move. They don't check to see what the response will be by the opponent. So, if it looks like they're sacrificing material and you don't see a trap, then you might as well just go ahead and take it. So it looks like we just go up in material. The knight only gained that pawn, and we grab the knight. So always keep an eye on that, because sometimes your opponent will just make a mistake, and if there's no hidden trap, you have to do a little calculation, then you just go up in material. And if you can't get a direct attack on the king or a checkmate, then you can win by grabbing up material and then hopefully going into a winning endgame. All right, let's see. Now, how would you go into a winning endgame? Well, if you're up in material, you want to try and trade off the rest of the pieces and use your extra piece or pawns to pick off their pawns and promote your own pawns. You want to avoid pawn trades, because if you were up by a bishop or a knight and all the pieces were gone, but then you trade off all the pawns, you can't deliver a checkmate with just a bishop or a knight alone. King and bishop or king and knight cannot win against a lone king, unless there's something else on the board that maybe blocks the attack, or the escape, I should say, of the king. All right, let's see here. What do we have? Piecewise, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pawns for black, 4 for white. But our opponent, are they ahead? Let's see. Rook and rook, knight and bishop. But they have an extra rook, or a rook versus our knight. And usually the rook is stronger because it's a longer range piece. It can move across the board more quickly than a knight, but you still have to watch out for the knight's forking power. So, what do we do here? If we're looking at checks first, we could just pick off this bishop. Once again, if you see a piece that looks like it's free, you should probably consider taking it unless there's a hidden trap involved. So just double check. Make sure to ask yourself, well, what will happen after I capture that piece? Does my opponent have some kind of check, capture, or threat that they can unleash against me? And if you don't see anything, then it's probably okay to take that piece. So if we do that, then we'll have 2 knights for a rook. And then we have that extra pawn as well. So that should do it. All right, that's what they wanted. That was only a 100 rated problem. So the very basics of pattern recognition, and I don't know if it's so much as patterns, but if you see free material, consider taking it, but just double check for traps. All right, I'll do 5 more problems and then wrap this video up. Okay, we just had a capture. If we do a quick material count, we have 6 pawns. Our opponent has 7, so we're down by a pawn. But the rest of the material, okay, we're also down a knight as well. Okay, so we need to look at something forcing to turn the tide of the game. And how do we do that? Well, let's look at checks first. Do we have any checks? Look at the knight is hovering around the king. No check. No other long range pieces except for one can deliver the check, and it turns out to be a mate. So hopefully you found the answer. Pause if you want to look longer, but if not, we will capture this weak F pawn, which can be a source of weakness on both sides of the board because the king is the only one covering that pawn. So if you pile up on that, it can be an immediate attack against your opponent early in the game. Now, once they castle or move pieces, there might be more defenders of that pawn. But in the beginning, look for mating threats like this one, and a nice pattern of knight and queen working together here. Okay, on to the final four problems. Oh, it looks like we just had a capture, or our opponent just captured here. So, material-wise now, we have 6 pawns. Our opponent has 5, so we're up by a pawn. But looking at the other material, we just have queen, rook, and knight. Our opponent has queen, rook, and knight, but an extra bishop and rook as well. So once again, we need to attack if we can. Look for those checks first. Now, the rook, of course, could deliver a check here, but it would just be captured by the king. So what other checks do we have? Well, it looks like we have this attack here with the queen, and that should do it because the king will be forced to run, and we can just start attacking, chasing that king into the corner, and then deliver a mate here on b2, and we'll be backed up by our rook. So check, check, and mate. So a great pattern there of putting the rook and the queen on the 7th rank. The 7th rank from your point of view, white's 2nd rank. But anytime you can put rooks or queen or rooks and queen all on this 2nd rank or 7th rank where all the pawns are, you can mow down some pawns potentially, and even lead to a checkmate like this. All right, the final 3 puzzles. Here we go. We just had a capture, quick piece count. We have 5 pawns. Our opponent has 7, so we're down 2 pawns. And let's see, we have 4 minor pieces. Our opponent has 4. We both have queens and rooks. So we're just down 2 pawns. All right. Well, if we're looking at checks first, hopefully you found the answer already. And the only piece that can check is the queen. So if we go here, it should be a mate. Of course, we don't want to go here and check, or we would just be captured by the bishop or by the pawn. So another nice little queen and knight and queen pattern delivering the mate here, because the queen is cutting off the king from running and delivering that check and mate. All right, the final 2 problems. Okay, so we have 2 pawns to our opponent's 1, and then bishops. So what do we do here? Our opponent is desperately trying to defend, but by going after that pawn, I think it was a pawn there, that was a mistake moving from here. Now, why was that a mistake? Take a look, pause the video if you need more time. But hopefully you found the answer here. The bishop, when it was here, was preventing this pawn from moving forward and trying to queen there. because it was guarding the G2 square. Now, there's an important trick here called the square of the pawn. Now, you see right now, the pawn, if you draw a diagonal line up to the edge of the board and then connect all these four corners, it makes a square. So this is the square of the pawn. And if the king can move inside that square, he'll be able to stop the pawn. Now, because he just captured here with the bishop, this pawn can start running by going here. And once it gets to this square, the square of the pawn becomes much smaller. So now you have this square of the pawn. And I'll just highlight the squares. And if the king tries to stop that pawn by moving over here, he won't make it into that square once the pawn has moved to G2. So here we go. Now, see, the king can move here, but then the pawn will promote. So another basic pattern, very important, that can help you, especially when the pawns are further away. Like if the pawn was way down here and the king was on the other side of the board and you needed to see if that pawn would be able to make it or not, you'd have a larger square of the pawn. All right, let's move on to the final puzzle for today. What do we have here? A queen is just captured in the center. It's attacking the knight, but the knight is protected. It's our turn with the black pieces. If we do a quick pawn count and material count, we have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 7 pawns. Our opponent has 7 as well. And I don't think anything has been captured. 4 minor pieces versus 4 queen and rooks. Okay, with black to move, we're looking at checks first. So, the queen could go here. Now, something that's important when you're looking at these checks, don't just check because you can. You want to make sure that you have a good follow-up if you're going to deliver that check, because often it's more important if you don't have like a check that leads to an immediate win. It can be more important to just let that check hover in the air, where your opponent will always have to keep an eye on that possible check that could be coming his way. And sometimes they could make a mistake because they're worried about keeping an eye on that check after every move and when they're trying to calculate everything. So we do have this possible check here. But then what's the follow-up? Now remember, when a king is being attacked with check, there are 3 options: capture the attacker, block the attacker, or run. And if you can't do any of those, then it's a checkmate. But here, if the queen checks, can't capture it, you could block, or the king could run. So, it could block with a pawn, with a knight, with a bishop. So it doesn't look like that queen check would work. Now, what other checks do we have? Well, this knight can deliver checks from here, if it moves up here or if it moves here. But what is our follow-up? Okay, well, hopefully you found the answer. You don't want to go here and deliver a check because the knight could be captured, but it's important what you capture it with, because when our knight moves, we will deliver a discovered attack on the queen. And so if we were to go here, the queen could move out of the way and capture the checking knight. So it's important to move here, and the king will be in check, and we'll have a discovered attack on the queen. Now, what is the best response? Once we go here, probably our opponent will capture with the knight, because we're going to take his queen. He'll get a knight and a bishop out of it. So knight goes here delivering the check. Knight captures. We grab the queen, but the opponent will be able to take our bishop and at least get some material. If you're losing or going down in material, you definitely want to take as much material you can in the exchange. So check, grab the queen, and the opponent can at least get that bishop back. So if you're going to lose material, at least take as much with you as you can. All right, well, feel free to leave comments. I love hearing what viewers and subscribers have to say. If there's anything on your mind, let me know. Also, like and subscribe to support the channel if you haven't already. Thank you for watching, and have a super chess day.